Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. I want you to sit back, listen carefully and don't forget at the end to like, share with your friends and subscribe because what I'm about to share with you is a story that nearly tore my family apart and almost destroyed the company I built with my own two hands. My name is Caleb Monroe, and I am the founder and CEO of Monroe Innovations, a company I started 3 decades ago in a cramped garage with nothing but an old computer, stacks of handwritten notes, and dreams bigger than my pockets could hold. Over the years, with sweat and sacrifice, that dream became one of the most respected tech firms in the city. We built software, created jobs, and carried the pride of families who depended on their paychecks. For me, Monroe Innovations wasn't just a company. It was the living symbol of everything I had fought for in my life. That's why nothing could have prepared me for the day I learned my own daughter, Liana, was plotting against me. It was on a gray Monday morning when my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer, Marcus. "Caleb, you need to come to my office right away," he said, his voice strangely tight. When I arrived, Marcus handed me a thick envelope. My name was printed boldly across the front. Inside were papers that felt like knives in my chest. A lawsuit. Liana Monroe, my only daughter, was suing me to have me declared incompetent to run my own company. I read the words again and again, my hands trembling as though the letters themselves were poisonous. My daughter wasn't just challenging me. She was attempting to take the company away from me entirely. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Memories of her childhood rushed at me, Liana's laughter as a little girl when I carried her on my shoulders, the way she used to run into my office to draw on the whiteboards while I worked. I had believed we shared not just blood but a bond that could withstand anything. Yet here I was, facing betrayal from the one person I thought would protect my legacy. Her claim was brutal. She accused me of being emotionally unstable, too old-fashioned in my business strategies, and a risk to the future of Monroe Innovations. She had already rallied a number of shareholders, promising them higher dividends through aggressive automation and by cutting staff. According to her, my attachment to people, the workers I called family, was a weakness dragging the company into the past. When I got back to my office, I shut the door and sat in silence. My co-founder and lifelong friend, Daniel Shaw, walked in, his brow furrowed. "Caleb, I just heard. Is it true?" I nodded slowly. He let out a low whistle and dropped into a chair. "I never thought Liana would go this far. What's her endgame?" "I don't know," I muttered, though deep inside I knew she wanted control. She wanted the company to be hers, and she was willing to burn me down to get it. Marcus and Daniel insisted we begin digging immediately. "If she's bold enough to file this kind of lawsuit," Marcus said, "she's hiding something. No one makes a move this drastic without a plan." That night I barely slept. I paced my study, staring at old family photographs of Liana as a teenager at her graduation, her first day working at the company, and even the last Christmas we celebrated together. How had we gone from that to this? My heart was torn, but my mind knew one thing. If she thought I would roll over quietly, she had gravely miscalculated. The next day, Daniel brought files to my office. "You'll want to see this," he said, dropping them onto my desk. Inside were documents showing irregular transfers of corporate funds, projections that didn't align with reality, and promises Liana had been making to employees, promises of unsustainable salary increases. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just ambition. This was manipulation, deception, and outright sabotage. "Caleb, she's painting you as unstable," Daniel said. "But if these documents are real, she's the one endangering the company. We need to expose this before it's too late." I closed the file slowly, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles went white. Betrayal from an outsider would have been easier to face. But betrayal from my own daughter? That was a wound that bled deeper than any courtroom battle could ever reach. Marcus joined us later that evening, laying out the strategy. "We'll need evidence of every irregular transaction, every false projection, every unauthorized transfer. And Caleb, will also need to address the personal side of your reputation, your emotional state. She's using your moments of frustration against you. So we need to be honest but firm." I felt a wave of shame then. She wasn't entirely lying. Over the past year, I had lost my temper in meetings. The stress of competition, the constant innovation demands, the sleepless nights, they had taken their toll. I had shouted, slammed doors, sometimes walked out when anger overtook me. Maybe Liana had watched those moments and decided I was no longer fit to lead. Maybe in her mind, she was justified. But justification didn't excuse betrayal. The weeks that followed were a blur of investigation. Daniel and Marcus uncovered more. Emails where Liana's lawyer, a sharp woman named Valerie Cross, hinted at manipulating witnesses, financial models doctored to make me look incompetent, and secret meetings with investors where Liana promised the moon while hiding the real numbers. Each discovery cut me deeper, but it also fueled the fire in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for my company anymore. I was fighting for my name, my dignity, and the legacy of everything I had sacrificed. I had walked through storms to build Monroe Innovations, nights when I sold furniture to keep the lights on, days when I coded until my eyes blurred, moments when I had chosen the company over family dinners. And now, my daughter was using those very sacrifices as ammunition against me. One night, as I sat alone in my office, Daniel found me staring out the window. "Caleb," he said softly, "do you ever wonder if maybe she's doing this because she feels you weren't there enough? That maybe this is her way of getting back at you?" His words landed heavily. I swallowed hard. Had my neglect created this? Was this lawsuit not just about power but about resentment? Years of unspoken pain finally boiling over? The thought shook me to my core. Still, I knew one thing. I couldn't allow her to destroy Monroe Innovations. Even if I had failed her as a father, I couldn't let her take everything from me as a CEO. My heart ached, but my resolve hardened. By the time the court date loomed, we had a mountain of evidence. I looked at the faces of my team, Marcus with his sharp mind, Daniel with his unwavering loyalty, and I realized I wasn't alone. We were ready to step into the storm, no matter how fierce it became. And deep down, a new fire sparked within me, not just to protect my company, but to uncover the truth about why my daughter had turned against me. The day of the hearing arrived with an air so heavy it felt like rain pressing against the courthouse windows. Even though the sky was dry, I wore a dark navy suit, the one I had saved for monumental occasions, and walked into that courtroom with Daniel on one side and Marcus on the other. The world I had built, the life I had sacrificed for, balanced on a knife's edge. And sitting across the room, cold-eyed and composed, was my daughter Liana. She didn't glance at me, didn't flinch. It was as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in her way. When the judge called the case, Valerie Cross, her lawyer, rose first. Her voice was smooth and confident, echoing through the wood-paneled room. "Your Honor, today we present clear evidence that Mr. Caleb Monroe is no longer capable of responsibly managing Monroe Innovations. His erratic emotional behavior, coupled with outdated business practices, poses a severe risk not only to the shareholders, but to the employees and future of the company." She gestured to Liana, who took the stand with an air of cool authority. "I have witnessed my father lose his temper in meetings, walk out on important negotiations, and refuse to adapt to automation practices that could double our profits. He is holding this company back. My only intention is to protect the future of Monroe Innovations." Her words stung like acid poured onto old scars. I could see the jurors nodding, and could feel the shareholders she had convinced sitting in silent support behind her. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in my chest. Was she right? Had I become the very thing I swore never to be, an anchor dragging the company into decline? But then Marcus stood. His presence commanded the room in a different way. Calm, deliberate, like a surgeon preparing to cut through deception. "Your Honor, while Ms. Monroe paints a picture of a father too emotional to lead, the truth is far darker. We will show evidence of falsified financial projections, unauthorized transfers of company funds, and promises made to employees that no business could sustain without catastrophic collapse. These actions were not those of a protector, but of someone positioning themselves for power at any cost." The judge gave a slight nod, and suddenly the battle began in earnest. The first piece of evidence Marcus presented was a series of internal emails. "Your Honor, these messages show Ms. Monroe and her counsel discussing the presentation of projections to investors that differ significantly from the actual numbers provided by our accounting department." The screen lit up with words that could not be denied. One email from Liana read, "We'll adjust the forecast. Investors want growth, so we'll give them growth. By the time they realize, I'll be in control. Murmurs filled the courtroom. I caught Liana's jaw tighten, but she masked it quickly. Valerie objected, claiming the emails were taken out of context. The judge overruled. Next, Daniel took the stand, his voice steady as he testified about the irregular fund transfers. Over $2 million were moved without board authorization. The destination accounts trace back to shell companies linked to Ms. Monroe's associates. At that moment, I looked at my daughter and silently begged her to show remorse, to at least glance at me with some trace of the girl I had raised. But her eyes remained steel, fixed forward, as if this was a chess game and I was just another piece to eliminate. Valerie counterattacked by parading witnesses who testified about my temper. Former employees recalled meetings where I slammed my fist on the table, where I raised my voice until the walls vibrated. One even said I stormed out during a product presentation. Each word felt like a hammer against my ribs. Liana sat back as they painted me as a tyrant, unstable, incapable of modern leadership. When it was my turn to testify, I walked slowly to the stand, gripping the wood railing like it was the only thing holding me upright. Yes, I said, my voice unsteady but clear. I have lost my temper. I have raised my voice, slammed doors, and carried the weight of stress heavier than most people could imagine. But never once did I stop fighting for Monroe Innovations, for the people who rely on us. My anger did not come from weakness, it came from caring too much, from refusing to let my company or my employees be reduced to disposable numbers. I paused, the silence in the courtroom deafening. What I cannot accept is betrayal. My daughter has falsified projections, moved money in secret, and promised the impossible. These are not the actions of someone protecting a company. These are the actions of someone willing to burn everything just to sit in the chair I occupy. The jury's eyes lingered on me longer than before. I felt the tide shift, if only slightly. Then Marcus revealed the final blow. A whistleblower stepped forward, an accountant from our finance department who testified under oath that Valerie had pressured him to alter spreadsheets, and even hinted at forgetting to mention certain transactions if he wanted his promotion. The courtroom gasped. Valerie's face flushed red, but she tried to recover, calling it slander. The judge's glare silenced her. Piece by piece, the image of Liana as a savior crumbled. Every time Marcus revealed another thread of deceit, I watched her composure falter just a little more. Still, she never looked at me. Not once. Days dragged into weeks as the trial continued. Each night I returned home exhausted, staring into the darkness of my bedroom, replaying every word, every look. I should have been furious, triumphant even, but all I felt was a deep, hollow ache. How had we come to this point where truth itself had to be dragged into the light like a wounded animal? Finally, the closing arguments came. Valerie stood one last time, her voice brittle around the edges. Mr. Monroe may have evidence of irregularities, but at the heart of this case is one fact. He is no longer capable of leading. Sometimes the hardest thing for a family is to admit when it's time for a new generation to step in. Marcus rose and delivered his final strike. This case is not about generational change. It's about deception. It's about a daughter and her counsel manipulating numbers, stealing funds, and coercing witnesses to create the illusion of incompetence. Caleb Monroe is not perfect. He admits his flaws openly. But imperfection is not incompetence. The true risk to Monroe Innovations is not Caleb. It is the reckless ambition sitting right there. He pointed directly at Liana. The judge deliberated for what felt like eternity. When he finally returned, the words fell like stones into water. The court finds in favor of Mr. Caleb Monroe. The petition to declare him incompetent is denied. Furthermore, evidence of misappropriation of funds and attempted witness tampering will be referred for further investigation. Gasps filled the room. Relief washed over me, but it was laced with sorrow. I had won. I had kept my company. But as I looked at Liana, her face pale, lips pressed into a thin line, I realized I had lost something far more precious. She finally turned her eyes toward me then, just for a flicker of a second, and in that glance I didn't see victory or defeat. I saw pain. I saw years of resentment that no court ruling could erase. The gavel struck, ending the battle. But inside me a storm still raged, because I knew the war between father and daughter was far from over. The courthouse steps emptied quickly after the verdict, leaving behind only echoes of voices and the faint clicking of heels against marble. I stood there for a long moment, the wind catching my suit jacket, staring at the doors where Liana had just walked out without so much as a word. The victory should have filled me with pride, but instead, it sat in my chest like a stone. I had fought for Monroe Innovations and I had won. But I had lost something much deeper. The closeness of the only child I had. Back at the office, Daniel clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, Caleb. You saved the company." His smile was wide, but his eyes were cautious, as if he could see the emptiness behind mine. "Did I really save it?" I asked quietly. "If the price was losing my daughter, is that victory worth celebrating?" Marcus joined us carrying a stack of documents. "We'll need to prepare for the financial investigations into Liana's actions and Valerie's misconduct. It's not over, Caleb. There are still battles ahead." But I shook my head. "The courtroom part may be done, Marcus, but the real battle isn't about paperwork or profits. It's about the damage done between me and Liana. That's the wound I don't know how to heal." For weeks I avoided her. I buried myself in work, attending endless meetings, shaking hands with nervous employees who whispered about the scandal. Monroe Innovations was intact, but the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. People wanted to know what kind of leader I would be after such a public war with my own blood. I carried myself with steadiness, but inside I was haunted. Late one night I sat in my office staring at a photo of Liana as a little girl, her hair in messy braids, smiling proudly as she held up a toy robot we had built together. I remembered how her eyes used to light up whenever she was around me, how she once begged to learn coding, so she could help Daddy with the company. Somewhere along the way I had lost her. Somewhere between board meetings and product launches, I had failed to see her growing resentment, her need for acknowledgement, her hunger to step into her own light. The next morning I made a decision. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice flat. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want to talk," I said simply. There was a long pause. Then she replied, "Fine. Tomorrow. Noon. The old cafe near 5th Avenue." And she hung up. The following day I arrived early. The cafe hadn't changed in years, the same chipped wooden tables, the same chalkboard menu, the same faint smell of roasted beans and cinnamon. I sat by the window, my heart pounding like a young man's. When Liana walked in, she looked different. Not the polished executive from the courtroom, but my daughter, stripped down, tired, her eyes shadowed. She sat across from me without a word. For a while we just stared at each other. Father and daughter, strangers bound by blood. Finally I broke the silence. "Why, Liana? Why did you go that far?" Her lips trembled, and for the first time in months, I saw the crack in her armor. "Because you never saw me, Dad. You saw Monroe Innovations. You saw your employees, your investors, your dreams. But you never saw me. I worked in that company for years trying to prove myself, and you kept treating me like a little girl who couldn't handle responsibility. I was angry. I was tired of waiting for you to hand me even a fraction of what you gave everyone else. So I took it." Her words pierced me deeper than any courtroom testimony. I leaned back, swallowing hard. "Liana, I know I failed you. I know I put the company first too many times, missed too many dinners, ignored too many of your achievements. I thought I was building this company for us, for you. But I see now that in chasing my vision, I neglected yours." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "So now what? You won. You exposed me. I'm ruined, and you're still the king of Monroe Innovations." I reached across the table, my voice steady. "I don't want to be king, Liana. I want to be your father. And I don't want you ruined. I want you beside me. That's why I'm offering you something. A chance to rebuild, not as enemies, but as partners. I want you to be co-CEO of Monroe Innovations." She froze, staring at me as if I had just spoken a foreign language. "You'd trust me after everything I did?" "Trust is broken, but it can be rebuilt," I said softly. "You're brilliant, Liana. You see things differently, and the company needs that. But it also needs a heart. It needs to remember that employees are people, not just numbers. Alone we're flawed. Together, we can balance each other." Her face crumpled then, years of bitterness cracking under the weight of something she had wanted all along: acknowledgement. She didn't answer right away. She just sat there, silent tears rolling down her cheeks, and for the first time in so long, I saw my little girl again. After that day, we began slowly, cautiously. At the next board meeting, I announced the new leadership structure. Caleb and Liana M. In the legacy of Monroe Innovations, I told them, we are reshaping it for the future with both experience and innovation guiding the way. The months that followed were not perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, moments when old wounds threatened to reopen. But there were also breakthroughs. Liana brought fresh ideas about automation that we adapted without sacrificing jobs. I taught her the importance of loyalty, of valuing the people who carried us through storms. Slowly, Monroe Innovations became stronger than ever. Not just a company, but a symbol of healing. One evening, months after the storm had passed, we gathered as a family for dinner, something we hadn't done in years. Laughter filled the room. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. The company was safe. My daughter was by my side. And though the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer defined us. They reminded us of how far we had come. As I looked across the table at Liana, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms. They're won in the quiet spaces where forgiveness is offered, where broken bonds are mended, and where love is chosen over pride.
Moral lesson.
Life will test us in ways we never expect. Betrayal can come from those closest to us, and victories can feel hollow when love is lost. But if we are brave enough to confront our mistakes, humble enough to listen, and willing to extend our hands even after the deepest wounds, reconciliation becomes possible. Companies can be rebuilt, fortunes can be regained, but the bond of family is the one treasure we must fight hardest to protect. So, if you're listening to my story today, I encourage you to choose healing when pride tempts you to choose war. Choose forgiveness when anger demands vengeance. Because at the end of every storm, the only thing worth carrying forward is love. Hello guys, thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what lesson you've learned from my journey, and how you'd handle betrayal if it came from someone you love.